Hey guys, what is up? AwesomeTheSauce here. Hope you guys are having a great day and welcome to one of the craziest update videos I think I'll ever make. Today's video is going to be covering the newest dev diary, which is basically titled the Caramel PvP update. Now, I didn't really know that this was coming at all. I thought this was just like a PvE update, like, you know, it was like a new world and that was it. This is going to be a really big game changer. So I'm going to review what the dev diary covers and I'm going to talk about my opinions of it. This dev diary is all about enchants. Now, again, if you are completely new to PvP, when we're talking about enchants, we're talking about epics, we're talking about colossals, we're talking about gargantuans, giants, monstresses, strongs, all of these enchants. But the real, like, to specify what this topic is about are pre-enchants. Now, to understand the importance of pre-enchants in PvP, right? You basically, if you're like, you know, doing well in PvP, what you're basically going to be doing is making your main deck do one thing for you, and you're going to be making your side deck do another thing for you. How a lot of people will try to organize their main deck and their side deck is by making sure that they mainly have utilities in main, and they'll have a lot of their hits inside. And the way they make most of these hits, right, is that before they go into PvP, they'll buy a bunch of gargantuans or a bunch of unstoppables or even a bunch of mutates, and what they will do is make a bunch of copies of them so that they can just add them into their deck. And this way, what it does is that you can always try to draw for your utilities, whether that be blades, bubbles, shields, or strike, or sunblock in main, and you'll go for your hits when you need them. This dev diary is saying that that's not going to be a thing anymore. Pre-enchanted TCs are just not going to be a thing anymore. Let's talk about the pros and the cons, as I said I would do. I'm going to review this update in much of a non-biased way as I can. I can see the reasoning behind getting rid of pre-enchants. I can see it. Alright, I'll start with a pro, I guess. I feel like if you're focused on getting people into PvP, it's really good to remove barriers to entry, and one of the barriers is just how many TCs you make, right? That being said, I don't think this is that strong of a barrier. I don't really think that, you know, like, it's that hard to just buy a bunch of gargantuans and make a bunch of FFAs, make a bunch of hepatitises, make a bunch of King Art. I don't really see the need to classify this as such a big barrier, but I do see why that might be a good reason to make an update like this. Now, the cons, however, is that this is going to completely change how PvP works in its entirety. Now, if you really want your main deck and your side deck to do anything different, what you're going to have to do is put a lot of your hits in main and a lot of your utilities inside. And if you're thinking there's a way to cheese this update, if you're thinking there's an actual way to, like, cheese it, right? They're banning regular enchants too. So, like, epics, gargantuans, you can't just put a bunch of enchants and a bunch of hits and just call it a day. That's not how you can make a deck. These are also going to be banned. More on that later. Additionally, mutates, transmutates are also going to be banned according to this. And also, if you want to have a hit inside, you can only have the actual TC version of this. Now, I want to isolate just the transmutates and the regular damage TCs site. If I'm being blatantly honest, having those two things involved in this update is ridiculous. Let's talk about transmutates, right? To say that you need to actually have both the, if they're gonna ban the pre-enchanted versions of this, right? What they're saying is that you need to have an ice, like, let's say I wanted to have a fire wyvern. Not only would I need an ice wyvern in my main deck, I would also need to learn the mutate version of this. Now, if fire wyvern doesn't seem like such a big deal, let's not forget about spells like Death Minotaur. Death is already so bad at PvP. If you made it so that the only way that they could Death the Minotaur is by having a main deck Minotaur and a main deck Transmutate card, you're tripping. That is the worst possible thing you could do. I genuinely don't think that Transmutates should be a part of this, because they're already weak as is, because you cannot enchant them anyways. This doesn't solve this problem about enchanting them. This just seems to be an unnecessary addition to the rule. I can guarantee to you that the actual diversity in PvP that's brought by using transmutates, by thunderbirds, by fire wyverns, by death minotaurs, that will completely die when those spells aren't really broken as is. And now, let's talk about the TCs that you can put in your side deck that do damage. You can't pre-enchant them, so what that leaves is the regular original TC version of them. However, they still haven't actually updated these to reflect the actual spells. So right now, if you have an Ifrit TC, you're basically incentivized to put minus 90 TCs in your side deck. You're incentivized to put the gnomes that does double the dispel. You're incentivized to do the Lord of Winter that does 3 pips instead of 2. What is the point of the spell audit. I don't get it. I don't get why they would add that part. I genuinely think if you're gonna really go in on this, one, you really shouldn't include Transmutates for the reasons I just said. But the other thing, there's no reason why if a spell got audited, the TC version of that should be allowed in your side deck until they actually update it as well. It's absolutely crazy to me right now that if, as a fire, if I wanted to have free, it's way more convenient for me to actually pack the -90 versions of these instead of actually carrying an enchant and a free in main deck, because it's just more convenient and it's just a better spell. It should not be a better spell if you put it in your side deck if you're doing this, because at the end of the day, what it does is there are some schools that have really good spells that are retired and they're still using in TC form, and there are schools that don't have that. So I hate that part of the update. I hate the Transmutate part of the update. Let's talk about the main deck enchant update that I said we would get to later, because this might be the silver lining out of all of this. So the dev diary actually features a new spell called Solar Surge, which I'm gonna put on the screen right now. So this is a really I actually I like this. So instead of main deck enchants, right, when we said that you're not really allowed to put anymore, I guess after this update, you're not allowed to put epics in your main deck, you'd only be allowed to put those up, the Solar Surge cards after this update. And it's really cool, because what this does, and I love this, it immediately nerfs some of the 2-pip spells that were causing the most problems in PvP. If you put it on a 2-pip spell, you don't get the full 300 anymore. You only get 100 extra. So the Troll Spellment is getting nerfed with this. Fire Elf is getting nerfed with this. Even Wild Bolt, which is really interesting. If you hit low end on a Wild Bolt with this, it is a much worse move than hitting low end before. So same with Insane, actually. It's just not as good of a spell anymore. So it's really good that they put in an update that actually addresses some of the most problematic spells across the board. Schools like Balance, schools like Life, and schools like Death that don't really have broken low pip spells are actually going to benefit from this, and I don't think that's that bad of a thing. Now, that being said, I assume that if this is the only updated and main deck enchant that we get, then we can only hold 6 of them with this thing, right? With like the best deck. So you're telling me that I can only have 6 enchants that I can properly put on all of my spells? Like literally all, so I'm only going to be able to do 6 enchanted spells? I just don't get how that works. So that means that no matter what, I'm going to have to use unenchanted spells in side deck, and the games will just get much more low damage. I like the concept of this enchant. I genuinely think that 2-pip spells are way too powerful when you enchant them for what they're supposed to do. One of the big reasons why Fire Elf and Troll Spellment are so broken, and Wild Bolt and Insane Bolt if we're using the same logic. But if you only have 6 of these cards, then you're basically being incentivized to have a really small deck with just a few hits and a few enchants, or you're incentivized to use a bunch of unenchanted hits in side deck. And I don't think either of them really help PvP become more manageable or approachable for a new player. I think there are only 2 solutions where this update could work, the Solar Surge update. One, we need a bigger we need a bigger deck in general, so we can just pack more hits anyways, because otherwise, you know, you're never going to be able to like do the sheer damage that you need to do when so many of your hits are going to be unenchanted. And second off, I think there shouldn't be a limit on how many of these enchants specifically that you can put in your deck. And I think this is a big one. Solar Surge is supposed to fix how broken enchants are, so I don't think that there should be a limit on how many you can put in. I'm not really sure how they could do that, but all I'm saying is I genuinely feel like if you're really gonna make this a thing where you want more of your hits to be in main deck and more of your utilities in side deck just to prevent a bunch of pre-enchanted TCs from taking over PvP, you're gonna have to make it so you can use this Solar Surge card more than 6 times a match. They kind of address this a little bit by increasing the timer. They're gonna increase the timer from 30 minutes to 45 minutes. That's another underrated part of this update. I actually really like that. However, the reason why I'm a little antsy about this is because once you run out, do you have to reshuffle? Is reshuffle gonna be meta? And does that mean that you have to pack a bunch of 3-pip reshuffles? Is that how you're gonna be able to do multiple hits? Does that mean everyone has to carry Empower in their side deck as well? And how many other utilities are there remaining to have room for? I think the reason why Solar Surge, right? It could be like, fine, it could follow the rules of enchants and that normally it is, right? And they could have 6 main copies. I just think that they need to have another version of this that scales down. So, I mean, I know that this already scales, but maybe instead of plus 50 per pip in 25 minimum, maybe they could have, I don't know, something different where it's like, I don't know, a weaker version, plus 40 and then 20 minimum or something. I just think there needs to be more versions of this that does scale by pips, but at a lesser value at least, especially for strategies where you don't just go for one big hit, where you're going for, like, you know, several hits into a finisher. Some strategies are going to completely die out if you say that if you have the best deck in the game, which is a duelist deck, that you're only allowed to have 6 copies of this one enchant. It just doesn't make sense. So, unlike the whole Transmutate and, you know, the TCs that you can pack for damage, I have much less of a problem with this because I do think it actually addresses an issue in PvP. I just think the execution is flawed. I think a combination that I think must follow this, in my opinion, is one, you need to make sure that decks are just bigger, because 64 cards is just not going to work with this, in my opinion. And I just think, if not more copies of Solar Surge being allowed, then maybe a weaker version of this being allowed, so you can have, instead of 6 enchants, 12 in your deck. That might actually solve the issue more. All in all, I'm a little nervous about this. I think PvP is going to be chaotic. I definitely think the meta is going to change. I think schools that play a lot faster are just not going to be able to make decks that do that anymore. And all of these things could be good for some of the schools that suffer in the current meta. This could just be a meta shift. That being said, some of the things that I'm really concerned about that I genuinely think they have to fix is I think things like minus 90 TC simply need to be fixed for an update like this to happen. And I also just think Transmutates should not be a part of the pre-enchant ban in PvP. I just think that takes away from what makes PvP so fun, which is having multiple options to work with, especially because you can't damage enchant them, so I don't think they're broken at all. But yeah, guys, that's my 2 cents. I'm going to link the dev diary if you want to read it fully. I did try to cover everything. It's definitely a mixed bag for me. I am not looking forward to the Transmutate damage. I mean, we've gone over what I'm not looking for. And I'm also, like, very apprehensive about Solar Surge, the spell. It has a lot of good things going for it, but it could be just limited by the fact that you can't really use it that many times in a match without reshuffling. But yeah, y'all, let me know what y'all's opinions is. I'm nervous. I'm nervous. That's all I got. As always, drop a like if you enjoyed. Leave a sub if you're new. There's tons of links in the description, including my Twitch, my Twitter, my Discord, my Instagram, and of course, my Patreon. And as always, if somebody hasn't told you you're awesome today, they doing something wrong, so stay awesome. And yeah, y'all.